who I would want to see this documentary is the Cook County State's Attorney Office, because I know they'll still deny it. I want the Center for Wrongful. I want everybody that have told me no to really see what's going on.
From what I've heard about Chicago policing, this is a systemic problem, particularly the reliance on confessions instead of actual physical evidence connecting people to the crime. I would think that in Zuley's case, really a rather thorough look through some of his old cases, it seems to be sort of in the germinating phases of happening, might in fact find exactly what the state's attorney in Cook County found in Letheriel Boyd's cases, that people have been wrongfully imprisoned. How far does it go beyond Zuley? That really is just an enormously large question. But we've seen over the past, I mean, look at the early 2000s when the governor of Illinois threw out all the death penalty cases because of how tainted those investigations were. It seems like there really is something very rotten about criminal justice in Chicago.
Spencer Ackerman, reporter for The Guardian, connecting some dots that I never expected to be connected. Spencer, thanks for helping us understand your reporting. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
What this guy was doing in Chicago was shackling people to the floor for 24 hours. And well, in fact, his name is Zuley, Richard Zuley, Zuley. They sent him to Guantanamo in late 2002. 25 years on the streets of Chicago. A Guardian investigation has uncovered that Zuley used similar tactics for years. We're talking prolonged shackling, family threats, demands on suspects to implicate themselves and others. That Zuley used similar tactics for years behind closed-door police stations on Chicago's poor and non-white citizens. Multiple people in prison in Illinois insist they have been wrongly convicted on the basis of coerced confessions extracted by Zuley and his colleagues. The Guardian examined thousands of court documents from Chicago and interviewed 24 people with experience at Gitmo and the Chicago criminal justice system. Zuley and his colleagues shackled suspects to the wall. This is in Chicago. For extended periods, threatened their family members, and perhaps even planted evidence on them. The point was to yield confessions while even ignoring potentially exculpatory evidence.
All the media said the same thing. After they gave the media their story, and the media took it and ran with it. I was doomed before I even went to trial.
Leading our news at 5:30, a 24-year-old woman lies in a coma tonight, the victim of an execution-style shooting, apparently near her home on the Gold Coast. Dana Feitler was a junior executive at Continental Illinois National Bank, about to begin a prestigious MBA program. But tonight, she is struggling to survive.
Her family is at her side at the hospital and has offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of her attackers.
I can understand the exasperation of family. I fully sympathize with them.
Good evening. A 24-year-old woman clings to life tonight after she was shot and left for dead.
The Feitler family here from Milwaukee has offered a $10,000 reward for information about the shooting.
I have 10 detectives here at Area 6 working full-time on this case now, even working on their days off, according to the area police commander.
Police are asking for help from anybody who might have seen Dana the night of the attack.
Chicago police tonight are turning to the FBI in Washington, D.C. for some help in the robbery and shooting case of 24-year-old Dana Feitler.
Family and friends of Dana Feitler boosting the reward in her case, hoping it leads to the attackers who robbed and shot her.
Police say this suspect robbed a 24-year-old man 12 days before Dana Feitler was robbed and shot in the head.
Police have no solid leads.
A crime that shocked Chicago with its violence and has baffled police for months, but tonight, police may have finally cracked the murder case of Dana Feitler.
Now, the very latest is that police now have a clear picture of Dana Feitler's murder. In fact, the details are coming from a South Side man who has been arrested in connection with her death, and police have identified him as 34-year-old Lee Harris. He's from the 4600 block of South Lamont. Tonight, he is charged with robbery and murder.
It's almost unheard of, police say, to get a break this long after the crime. Harris reportedly began talking with street cops 14 weeks ago, and only recently did the case against him begin to unravel.
And Lee Harris was ordered held on $500,000 bond today on charges of murder and robbery.
And bond revoked tonight for Lee Harris. He's the suspect charged in last June's shocking murder of a young woman on the north side of the city.
Originally, it appeared that the 24-year-old woman had been forced to withdraw money from a nearby cash station by a robber who confronted her in the vestibule of her building. But now, a slightly different theory.
We feel there may have been some intention by the offenders to sexually assault Ms. Feidler. Ms. Feidler, in attempting to get them out of the vestibule and into an area a little more public, made an offer of money in return for not being hurt. They went up to the cash station, and that's where she did get the money. They didn't release her. They took her to an alley, and at that point she was shot. They went up to the cash station because Ms. Feidler was sharp enough to try to get them out of the vestibule where they had her alone. And she took them there to hopefully that she'd be seen by other people and might have a chance to break. This wasn't a question of bad guys staying outside of a cash station and trying to rob a victim.
One of the 4 men suspected of killing Dana Feitler in the Gold Coast in Chicago pleaded not guilty today. He is Lee Harris.
In 2003, Richard Zuley oversaw one of the most brutal interrogations on record at Guantanamo Bay. But Zuley tested versions of his interrogation techniques on the Chicago streets he policed as a detective for 30 years.
Here this guy is, in another country, torturing people, ordering that they be tortured. And so what do you think he'd do to a nigger in a Chicago police station? I didn't have a chance, man. Somebody that sick.
In 1990, Detective Zuley came to believe Letherial Boyd shot 2 men outside a Chicago reggae club, despite Boyd's alibi and despite a lack of physical evidence connecting him to the crime. Zuley shackled Boyd to a wall for hours.
I was mounted to the wall and floor. I remained in that room through 2 lineups. And I remember I asked, after that second lineup, I asked Zuley if anybody had picked me out of the lineup. And he said no. And I said, see, I told you, you got the wrong guy. I haven't done anything. He smiled at me and said, we're charging you anyway.
Court documents show that this piece of paper, with Boyd's nickname and drug prices written on it, appeared at the victim's hospital room weeks after the shooting. In a civil rights lawsuit, Boyd alleges Zuley planted the evidence, which was crucial to sentencing him to 82 years in prison.
82 years. I remember thinking, had he given me a life sentence, which in essence that is, but it's not going to hold up anyway. They're going to know. It held up. It held up. Half my life.
Boyd did 23 years in prison before he was exonerated and freed in 2013.
It still doesn't seem real. That I was there and went through all of that. Or that I'm here. I'm still trying to.
But Letherial Boyd may not be alone. The Guardian examined other cases, those of Lee Harris, Andre Griggs, and Benita Johnson, in which Zuley sent other suspects to prison for crimes they may not have committed.
The ones who I know, I have to help get them out of there. Somebody helped me. What kind of human being would I be if I didn't help them?
For weeks now, the Guardian newspaper, and specifically a great reporter I've known forever named Spencer Ackerman, has been digging into other cases that Richard Zuley worked on in Chicago besides Letheriel Boyd, now that Letheriel Boyd has now been freed. Also now, an attorney who worked on freeing Letheriel Boyd, an attorney who claims to have won more exonerations than any other private lawyer in the United States. She says that she is working on 3 other Richard Zuley cases from Chicago. 3 other convictions that involved that detective who went from Chicago to Guantanamo and back again. And these hard and potentially disturbing questions about how much overlap there was in his work between those 2 places. Joining us now is Spencer Ackerman, a reporter from The Guardian who's been doing so much of this digging.
That we've sent them detailed questions about Richard Zuley, about Chicago policing, and about related aspects to this story, and have heard absolutely nothing.
We have also tried to get a statement from Detective Zuley or from his lawyers. We have not received any response from them. Did you ever get in touch with Detective Zuley or for anybody representing him?
Repeated efforts all went completely nowhere. Through a spokeswoman for his current job, he declined to comment. We pursued further to try and give him every possible opportunity to respond to this story. Absolutely nothing.
So, Spencer, the troubling and obvious implication here is that there is some continuity between what ended up being pretty well-documented techniques at Guantanamo and an interrogation team that was led by this Chicago detective, and potentially interrogations and confessions obtained back home in Chicago. What can you say about the continuity in terms of techniques and what we know about how prisoners say they were treated?
So these techniques in Chicago, a history with a really disturbing and dark legacy of police torture, specifically against African Americans, appear to act like something of a harbinger for what would happen at Guantanamo Bay against Muslim detainees. For instance, Richard Zuley back in Chicago would coerce confessions by, in the case of a woman named Benita Johnson, who's still in prison, telling her that she wouldn't see her family again if she wouldn't sign a confession. That sounds rather reminiscent of Richard Zuley telling Mohamedou Slahi that if he didn't become either a confessant or a witness against other Guantanamo detainees and against al-Qaeda, people that he didn't actually know, his mother would be taken to Guantanamo Bay. His family would be threatened. That's a rather unsubtle rape threat, by the way, about sending his mother to the all-male environment at Guantanamo Bay. Letheriel Boyd had disconfirming evidence, things like a piece of paper, things like the lineup that you mentioned, the fact that other witnesses didn't see him, the car he drove was not the car seen at the crime, and so forth. Ignored by Zuley, and at trial. Similarly, Zuley at Guantanamo ignores a host of disconfirming evidence about Mohamedou Slahi, brings together some false information against Slahi. In a case of a guy who's still in jail in Illinois named Lee Harris, Zuley used that guy as an informant. And slowly but surely, over the course of a summer, to try and solve a really gruesome 1989 murder, convinces Harris to just sort of shade up his story so it looks more and more like he was an eyewitness. That sounds really reminiscent of trying to get Slahi to confess to things that he couldn't have been present at.
I had went to prison for burglary, and I did the time, and I got out, and I thought things was gonna be perfect, and it was. I mean, things was going pretty good. Me and my wife, we fell on a little hard times, but we was striving to make it. But then I made the initial mistake of I thought I had missed a parole date. And that was the worst thing that I could have ever done. Because once I done that, I went to my so-called friends and asked them could they help me out, because you know when you miss a parole, they have the option they can lock you back up, and there's various things they can do. And I didn't want to take the chance. Well, they said, yeah. But by the way, then they explained to me about the murder. And they say, well, Lee, you know, we're friends. Why don't you help us with this one? And I told them, sure, why not? Nothing, we're friends. Let's see what we can do. Well, time went by, and they was telling me various things that happened in the case, where the body was found, where the people was at, who they thought done it, the whole 9 yards. I say, okay. He say, listen, well, it's a reward. I say, it is? He said, yeah. He said, I know you've fallen on hard times, but look, we'll take care of you. Ride with us. We'll make sure you get the reward. In the meantime, we'll take care of you. We'll take care of your family. No problem. I believed him. Big mistake.
Police say Harris originally tried to con them out of the $25,000 reward for information about Feitler's murder. They say Harris has since confessed to the crime.
He thought he could go as far as doing a murder and then coming in and preying on the family of the victim and taking the reward money from them. A very cold and calculated individual.
Did he actually come in and say that he thought it was his by virtue of information he had?
Absolutely, absolutely. That was his intent from day one.
My name is Andrea Lyon. I'm a professor at DePaul University College of Law. Well, Lee Harris is a very charming, interesting, thoughtful, and manipulative person who, you know, was surviving by his wits. That's how he made it out there on the street, is that he would find a way to, you know, get something, you know, for $5 and sell it for 10, or that kind of thing. And he wasn't a criminal in the sense that he was, you know, breaking into houses or stealing, but he was right on the edge of criminality. And he was the sort of person that the police would often talk to because he would just kind of know what was going on the street. The young woman who, you know, who's the victim in this case was the kind of victim that it is the nightmare for a death penalty case. Female, white, wealthy, connected, and in a neighborhood that people expect to be safe. So you have all of those things going against you and a lot of publicity. And that made it very difficult for the state not to proceed. They needed to close the case, desperately needed to close the case.
People have the tendency to jump to conclusions. Once they try the case in the media, you're doomed. I mean, you could be the most innocent man in the world, but when the media get a hold to it and say that you've done it.
Given names, it's hard to find people. You might get lucky and do some good investigative work and find them on white pages, but we didn't really have a lot to go off of, and that part was really frustrating when you have a name and maybe you have a statement from a trial document, but you can't find the person in real life. That's really frustrating. Trying to get the other side of the story was really frustrating. We couldn't get a hold of one of the witnesses. Another witness kept blowing us off, which you don't expect to happen because she didn't do anything wrong.
Who is Diana Sepielli?
Diana Sepielli, she was the dog walker. That she was walking
I first ran into Diana Ciprielli. She was sitting in Area 6 with the security guard at Davis Press. They were sitting in the back, and they had me in another room. And I walked to the back, and she was showing them she had wrote some sketches. She had done some sketches of some people, and she had a person here, a person there, a person there, and another person without a face. She said one guy had a limp, and she threw these sketches. It was kind of like stick men or something, stick figures. But she said what every person was doing. She said, well, this guy here was walking next to the victim. This one here seemed like he was holding her hand. And this one over here seemed like, the one with the limp, seemed like he was just following. And then she had another guy off to the side the guy that had the limp was the guy that she said had on a chain, I think, that had a Cadillac emblem, if I'm not mistaken. And then she had another person that didn't have no face, that just had the head over to the side. Well, months later, the person with no face became me. After doing the preliminary hearings or whatever.
Did you ever spend any time with Diana Ciprielli while you were an informant?
No, the only time I've seen Diana Ciprielli once when she was at the police station with the Prestige. I've seen her twice. At the Prestige, when she was at the police station, and we looked at the sketches. And the second time I seen her is when she picked me out of a lineup.
So the first time you said that you were looking at the sketches that she brought in, is that correct?
Yeah.
Was she standing with you when you were going over these sketches?
Yeah, she was explaining the sketches.
And she was explaining the sketches to you?
Yeah, it was me. I want to say Craddock or King, but it was from Area 6 detectives, and we was all going. When it was going over, and she was explaining what everybody was doing. What the guy with the limp was doing. Who was holding her hand. The whole 9 yards.
Was there any DNA evidence in your trial? Was there any DNA evidence that could be tested?
The only DNA evidence that ever came up was evidence from Ronald Gray. In some kind of way that got botched.
And has that evidence been tested?
Well, we went to test it. We tried to test it, but they cut it out of the sweatshirt.
So there was blood. There was blood inside of a sweatshirt, and they tried to test it. When did they try to test it?
Karen Floyd and Brandon Max. They went and got the sweatshirt, and they was gonna send it to the lab. And the lab sent it back, say, "Hey, we tested what we got, but all the blood swatches been cut out."
And who did these blood swatches belong to? Well, I guess we don't know.
They was on Ronald Grant's sweatshirt.
And who is Ronald Grant?
It was Doughboy.
And who is Doughboy?
The one that Ciprielli originally picked out of a lineup, and they just didn't do that.
So you're telling me that Sepielli viewed a lineup with Ronald Grant, and she picked him out of the lineup.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She even said at trial, they had a picture. They had pictures, and it had an X on it, and she said that was the X she put on there for Ronald Grant.
How certain was she that she saw Ronald Grant that night?
She said on the scale of 1 to 10, she was 8.5% sure.
Did Ronald Grant walk with a limp?
Yes, he did.
Did Diana Sepielli originally describe one of the offenders as walking with a limp?
Yes, she did.
And she picked him out of a lineup.
And she picked him out of a lineup.
How sure was Diana Sepielli, on a scale of 1 to 10, regarding seeing you with the murder victim?
Well, it changed. It kept changing. First, she was almost sure. Then she was pretty sure. Then she was, I'm not sure. By the time we got to trial, she said, I'm not sure.
So she got on the stand and said, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Sepielli was a joke. But, you know, I kind of seen, as the trial lingered on, it kind of looked like she wanted to do the right thing, but didn't know how. And was scared that she had went too far. You know, and that's what they do. They do. I think they do them just like they did me. They hang something over their head and tell them, listen, if you don't go along with the plan, this, and this is going to happen. And that's, you know, and they just go along with them. Scare tactics. Fear is amazing. You know, it's amazing what people do with them because of a little fear. I know. I mean, I did it.
Most people do not believe that someone would falsely confess to something. They can't understand why that would happen. They falsely think that, you know, if I were arrested, you know, they have to pull my fingernails out, and I still wouldn't say I did something I didn't do and all this kind of stuff. And that's, of course, nonsense, okay? And as 60 Minutes has said, Chicago is apparently the capital of the false confessions in the United States. Because they're really excellent at getting them, and in fact most of the law that has come out about improper ways to get confessions has come from Chicago.
I don't even know David Tolles. I never seen David Tolles a day in my life. When I seen David Tolles, they was bringing him to the witness stand, and I'm looking for a guy to come out of the back, because I come out of when you go to court, you be in the back. So I knew he was locked up. So I'm expecting David Tolles to come out of the back with me. Yeah. He comes through the front door. He come walking through the front door, unescorted, and I'm in shock. But I thought this guy was locked up. He is. He's in witness protection. And he just come through the front door. And he came, and David Tolles told a story that was so amazing that I didn't know what he was talking about at one point.
David Tolles just made it all up. You know, the case wasn't enough in the news that if you could sell your testimony because you would know enough about the case to make it sound like the guy really said something to you. You know, this is one of the reasons my clients get mad at me, but I don't like to give them the police reports in jail because I fear someone will read them and then make up a jailhouse confession. I'm afraid of that. I don't mind if they read them, but I just don't want to have them because I'm scared of that.
Right.
And, you know, Tolles was looking to get out from under, I'm trying to remember what it was, an armed robbery, I think, or something like that, and he got a good deal.
When you were moved to the hospital where David Tolles was, did the judge move you there for your safety because you were receiving threats? And at the same time, and revoked your bond?
wasn't receiving no threats.
They said that they moved you to protective custody because you were receiving threats against your life.
No, I never received a threat. The only thing that happened to me was once they put me in the hospital, somebody tried to give me some disinfectant or something as Kool-Aid. But that was after I was already in the hospital. When I came from court that night, they took me, for some reason, they took me straight to the hospital. And you know, here's the crazy thing though, Rob. If they wanted to put me in protective custody, which eventually they did, they could have just sent me to Division 1 originally like they did. They didn't move me until after they said that David Toles popped up. So it was like they put me there. It was like they put me there so they could say David Toles made contact with me. After they arrested me, it's like they all sat around and say, okay, this is the story we ride with. And this is our man, David Toles. We're going to use him. And the only thing that Andrea was really focusing on, she said, Lee, David Toles' theory of what happened is completely different than what the police said what happened. You know,
I can't read that in the pre-trial.
Yeah, they're telling two different stories. You have to really pay attention to what David Toles' testimony was, especially to the grand jury, and then read the police report. It's like the police forget what David Toles was, what they were telling David Toles. That's why it was so amazing that when David Toles took the stand, his story was so amazing that they had the court reporter to go behind David Toles and read what he told the grand jury. Forget about what you testified to saying. This is what you told the grand jury. And Andrea said, you can't do that. I heard Andrea say, you can't do that. And the judge allowed it.
David Toles was allowed to read the testimony he gave to the grand jury?
No. He testified first. He took the stand. He told his story. That's when he said that he could remember a lot if it benefited him. Well, they asked him what he told the grand jury, and he went to the Lakeshore Drive and they kicked somebody out of the car, and they was gonna knock her or some mess. But that was not what we was looking at the defense tape. That's not what he said. So when he got through testifying, the state called the court reporter up from the grand jury, and she read into evidence the testimony that he testified to at the grand jury. And Andrea said that's prior inconsistent statement, something like that it shouldn't be allowed, and the judge allowed it. Yeah. She said, Lee, this has never happened. I've never seen this happen. Never. But it happened. No, I didn't lose them. The people here, they was in my property when I got the Pontiac. And the people in here took those letters out of my property, called me up to Internal Affairs, and asked me about the letters. And then after I filed the grievance and made us think about it, they went to give me the letters back, and then they claimed they couldn't find them. What made them take them letters out of my property? I have the slightest idea. Out of all the when I got the Pontiac, I must have had 50 or 60 letters from family, friends, those were the only letters they went in there and took out of there. It was like they knew that I had them letters. And they took them from me. That's how I didn't lose them, they took them. Yeah, and the black guy, he still work here. He was gonna give them back to me. And he said, Lee, I can't find them. I don't know where they at. And he looked hard. He said, I done looked everywhere. I done went to property. I done went in our office. I don't know who got them letters. But then at the same time, the state's attorney knew about the letters.
How does the state's attorney, I don't even remember how anybody knew about the letters.
Somebody here had to tell them.
Yeah.
Somebody here at Pontiac had to tell them about them letters. Because, you know what was funny? The first time that Karen Floyd came to Pontiac to see me, usually they have the lawyers to visit in the visiting rooms. When Karen Floyd and her investigator came to see me, they let them inside the institution, inside the internal affairs office, in one of their offices. I asked her, say, Karen, you know, this is unusual. Why are we meeting in their office? Why are we in the internal affairs office instead of in the room where the regular lawyers meet at? She said, they don't meet here? I said, no. And after that, we didn't go in that room no more.
My name is Winona Tabron, and I have been knowing Lee Harris for over 40 years. We were both raised in Cabrini. He stayed in 1150 North Sedgwick with me. His mom had all boys, and she wanted a girl, and I used to go up to her house all the time. His mom and my mother was friends, and that's how I met Lee. Once we was going to play a softball game, and one of the guys from the building approached Lee and was getting ready to fight him, and said that he had lied on him to the police. So they were trying to beat him up, and we begged them, please leave him alone. Let us go play our softball game.
You know, I see that it's important that the police keep saying that I was an informant, right? Now follow me.
Okay.
If, let's say that's true, why would they go and tell the people on the street? You know, the police told the people on the street. Why?
Why do you think?
I know why. Because that way they had control of me. That's how they get control. You can't go back to that area now because we done contaminated the area for you. And that's, you understand what I'm saying? That's why people don't want to help the police right now. Because here's what happens. Here's what happens. I don't know if you know this or not. You may help one of them, and he'll tell his buddy, well, my man Lee Harris helped me out. Okay, so his buddy will come to you and say, listen, why don't you help me out? And you say no. So what he do is, he go back on the street and tell everybody on the street, well, Lee Harris is a snitch. Watch what you're doing. Then he'll come right back and say, you still don't want to help him? And he'll keep that cycle going until it's unsafe. The police is what told everybody in the area that I was helping them. The people didn't know. They didn't know. They didn't know until they went back out there to tell them and told them. And that's a dangerous game they play. But that's how they control you. You know, and I've been meaning to discuss that with you. That's a dangerous game they play. And they keep that game up, and they keep that up, and it follows you even down here in the penitentiary. Down here in the penitentiary, some kind of way, all of a sudden, an inmate got a copy of your police report, or an inmate got a copy of just a page or two of a transcript. Hey, how did you get that? And they don't worry about it. I got it. I know everything about it. So you know, those are dangerous games they play. But nobody look at that. How do people on the street know that you're helping them if they don't go back and tell them? Can you answer that for me, please?
I can't.
If don't nobody know but me and you, and then the next day, 2 or 3 people on the street know it, how did they find out? If I didn't tell them, they had to tell them because then nobody know but me and them. You understand what I'm saying?
They put your life in danger.
They put your life in danger. That way you have to depend on them. And the only way that they help you at that point, you got to keep on helping them. And that's crazy, you know. And people don't believe that happened, but that's why people don't trust the police. That's why people don't come forward and tell police what happened. Because they'll tell one guy trying to be a good guy, and he'll mention it to his buddy, and his buddy will go right back out there and tell the people they trying to catch. It's crazy. That's a crazy game they play, buddy. A crazy game. And then you wind up in jail like me, doing 90 years. I know firsthand what happens because they made it where I was contaminated, and me and the family was contaminated in the area. We was like the plague. And the only reason we was like the plague because they went out back to the area and told them. I didn't tell them. My wife didn't tell them. The kids didn't tell them. They went out there and told them.
But that guy that was gonna jump on him, the police told him that Lee snitched on them.
So the police let the people in Cabrini Green know that Lee snitched on him?
Yes.
They
let Lee know that he told something on them, and the guy was gonna beat him up, and we begged them not to jump on him.
So the guy that was going to beat Lee up on the way to the softball game, he said that the police told him directly that Lee was a snitch.
Yes.
Police may be close now, they tell me here at Area 6, to arresting the trigger man and the rest of his accomplices. Several police officers were patrolling the Rush Street bar area the night of the attack. That's only about 2 blocks away from where Dana Feitler lives. Those police officers have come forward in the last couple of days saying they remember seeing Lee Harris that night and may be able to help identify the rest of the people with him. Reporting live at Area 6 Police Headquarters, I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Back to you in the newsroom.
Yeah. Well, out of all this time that we've been talking to him, why we didn't say, hey, yeah, he's one of the ones we seen with him. No, that never happened. And you're right, the rest of the cops didn't go along with it. We need to know which cop they tried to tell get to say that. You know, if that was the case, it is no way in the world they wouldn't have used that. It's no way. If the cops remember seeing me with some guys, it's no way in the world that wouldn't have come up again.
Today marks the anniversary of one of the most infamous crimes in the history of Illinois. It was 20 years ago today that 2 robbers walked into the Brown's Chicken and Pasta restaurant in suburban Palatine and shot 7 people to death, including the owners. ABC 7's Eric Hahn caught up today with the daughter of the owners.
The restaurant is gone, replaced by a bank, but there's no erasing the memories of that horrible crime.
I have not walked in there. No, I just gone through the drive-thru. I won't walk in the building. So.
It was incomprehensible. 7 people gunned down on a cold January night. Their bodies piled in a freezer at this Brown's Chicken in Palatine. All the victims worked at the restaurant, including owners Richard and Lynn Ehlenfeld.
It is really hard to not have your mom and dad to lean on or just ask silly little questions to, just to go to for advice.
The killers would be identified as Juan Luna and James Degorski. Police say they waited until the restaurant was minutes from closing before committing the deadly robbery of less than $2,000.
Not everyone died at once. They knew, some people knew what was happening.
The men would remain free for years after the murders, as a task force of multiple police agencies hunted down thousands of leads.
To help myself move on, just decided that, you know, it probably wasn't going to be solved ever, and that was okay.
Finally, in 2002, a former girlfriend of Degorski's finally came forward. Police connected Luna through DNA evidence, a saliva sample from a chicken wing collected by a technician. At the time of the murders, DNA tracking was in its infancy.
She envisioned a day when DNA could be used to not just test blood, but saliva.
2 decades later, Joy Ehlenfeld is still finding peace.
It took me a while to not feel guilty about it when those days come up, and I would go to bed at night and go, oh God, I didn't think about them today, or I didn't cry today. But it's been 20 years, so, you know, your life moves on.
Luna and Degorski are both serving life sentences, though it took 9 long years to bring them to justice.
There is a story that has been breaking over the last few days that has the most unexpected geographic twist right in the middle of it. Starts in Mauritania. Mauritania is a very large country. It's in West Africa. It borders Senegal and Algeria. It's sort of in that neighborhood. Its land area is 90% the Sahara Desert. 2 months after 9/11, so September, October, November 2001, a man walked into police headquarters in the capital city of Mauritania, and he turned himself in for questioning. He had lived in Germany in the past. He had been questioned a number of times in conjunction with a bunch of different terrorism investigations. And when the police called him after 9/11 and asked him to come in and be questioned again, he said okay, and he came in voluntarily. Now, initially, the U.S. and other intelligence agencies had suspicions that this guy might be some sort of al-Qaeda operator at some level. They didn't really know. Maybe he was a facilitator or a recruiter. But eventually, they took him into custody and got him to Guantanamo. They sent him to Jordan. He didn't exactly know where he was going to end up. Where he ended up was Guantanamo. And once he was at Guantanamo, they eventually decided that that guy was not some low-level facilitator. They decided he was a huge deal, a huge priority. The Defense Intelligence Agency in 2003 designated him as having special projects status. And so they planned a special projects special interrogation for him. They wrote up their plan, their interrogation plan of what they wanted to do to him. That written plan for what they wanted to do to him ended up in the torture report that the Senate released right after the 2008 election. Wall Street Journal reporter named Just Braven also got hold of it and wrote it up. He describes the interrogation plan as such, quote, A January 2003 agency memorandum listed interrogation tools that included yelling, strip searches, shaving the head and beard, and 20-hour days. Water could be poured on his head to enforce control. He could be ridiculed, placed in a mask, made to wear signs with Arabic labels like liar, coward, or dog. Dogs could be brought in to bark and agitate him. The prisoner himself could be forced to act like a dog, collared, barking, performing tricks. He could be treated as a woman and forced to wear a burqa, or confronted with a female interrogator in close physical contact. The plan called for preventing him from praying, or alternately forcing him to worship a stag idol. He could be kept in a completely white room to reduce outside stimuli and present an austere environment, or have light filtered through red plastic to produce a stressful environment. Interrogators could question him while using a strobe light to disorient him and add to his stress level. Or he could be hooded while being questioned, thus inducing feelings of futility. They wrote it all up in a lot of detail, what they wanted to do to him. And then that request for what they wanted to do to him, it went to General Jeffrey Miller, who was running Guantanamo at the time, and he signed off on it. Then it went to the head of the Southern Command at the Pentagon, General James Hill, and he signed off on it. Then it went to the top lawyer at the Pentagon, William J. Haynes, and he signed off on it. Then it went to the Deputy Defense Secretary, Paul Wolfowitz. You might remember him from last week, recently turned up on Jeb Bush's list of foreign policy advisors for his presidential campaign. Paul Wolfowitz was asked to sign off on this specific interrogation plan for this guy. He signed off on it too. And then the plan kept going. It went all the way upstairs directly to Donald Rumsfeld, defense secretary at the time. And Rumsfeld personally signed off on it, on what they wanted to do specifically to this one identified Mauritanian guy. As part of this out there plan for this guy, they wrote up their plans, right? Including some very specific stuff they wanted to do to him. They said they wanted to blindfold him and take him out on a boat and drive him around the island, drive him around Guantanamo in the boat, making him think he was being transported by sea to some other faraway and worse prison. The man later said that they kept a bag over his head the whole time they kept him on that boat. They stuffed him into some kind of straitjacket, and then from his neck to his ankles, they packed all the space underneath his clothes, all the space between his bare skin and those clothes, with ice cubes. And then once he was packed like that with ice, with a bag over his head, on the boat, they beat the hell out of him. At one point, they showed him a fake letter about how they had arrested his mother at home in Mauritania, and they were interrogating her, too, the way they were interrogating him. And they were thinking about maybe bringing her to Guantanamo, putting her in as the only woman in the all-male prison. So this is this elaborate plan that they had written out and gotten permission for at all the highest levels. But when it came time to actually do it, when it came time to actually carry it out, who they turned to do it was a Chicago cop. And that's where this story takes this dramatic and weird geographical turn, because this guy at Guantanamo, the prisoner at Guantanamo, his name was Mohamedou Slahi. On his own terms, his case is one of the strangest and most well-documented cases at Guantanamo. He's still there today, right now. He's the only person to have published a diary of his time at Guantanamo while he is still imprisoned there. At one point, he was ordered released by a federal judge in 2010, a judge who said the government had never proven any of its claims against him, and he must be released. He was not released. Prosecutors at the military tribunals at Guantanamo decided to not bring any charges against this guy, even though he had confessed to everything under the sun, because he recanted all those confessions. He told his interrogators he would say anything they wanted to hear to stop them torturing him. Quote, "I don't care as long as you are pleased. If you want to buy, I am selling." So there's this very high-profile case at Guantanamo where his torture is really exceedingly well documented, in part because it's all written up and signed off on all the way to the top. We know everything they asked to do to this guy. We saw the plan they wrote up for him. Senate investigators documented what they actually did to him. The guy himself wrote up what they did to him. Nobody, including the military, believes his confessions because they tortured those confessions out of him. And now apparently the plan is to never prosecute him and never release him, specifically because of the way they tortured him and how much we know about that torture. And that was all done while he had special projects status at Guantanamo. And the guy who headed him up as a special project, the man who led that special project interrogation, that led to Mohamedou Salahi confessing to anything and everything, just make it stop. The guy who ran that interrogation is a Chicago police detective. Was, at least, at the time. Detective Richard Zuley of the Chicago PD. He was a Navy reservist when he was sent to Guantanamo, and he headed up what has become probably the most notorious post-9/11 interrogation not conducted by the CIA. After his stint running interrogations at Guantanamo, he ultimately went back to the Chicago PD. He was there until 2007 when he left the police department for another job. And now there's the question of his interrogations back home in Chicago. His cases back home in the Chicago PD.
Chicago has a long history of this issue of police torture. This month, the notorious Chicago police commander, John Burge, was released from a halfway house after he served 4.5 years for lying under oath. But what he's accused of was leading a torture ring that interrogated more than 100 African-American men in Chicago in the 1970s and 80s. They routinely used electric shock, suffocation with plastic bags, typewriter covers, among other methods, to extract confessions from men who were later shown to be innocent. The Chicago Torture Justice Memorial Project documented some of the men's stories. This is Shadid Mumin.
He handcuffed me real tight. As I said, he cut my circulation off. He went out of the room and stayed, I guess, about an hour. And he came back and tried to talk to me, ask me what could I tell him, about the robbery. I told him I couldn't tell you anything about the robbery. I don't know about what you're talking about. And he said then that, oh, you're going to play tough. So you will tell us before you leave here what we want to know. So I've been known to get out of people's what I want. He got real upset and said, you will talk, you black mother. He said, I'll make you talk, kill you in here one. So I still don't think so. He, in anger, he rushed to the typewriter and grabbed the plastic cover off there and just crammed it down over my head. And it's like he was a madman. And so a little officer helped me. I was trying to get my arms out from behind the chair, but I couldn't do anything. And I passed out. And like I say, he gave me a breath of air, and I came to conscious. You ready to talk? And I said, I don't have anything to tell you still. So he do it again. The third time, out of the third time, that's when I told him, I said, I'll tell you whatever you want to know, man. Just don't do this no more.
That's Shadid Mumin speaking about his interrogation by former Chicago Police Commander John Burge, statistics compiled by the People's Law Office. So Chicago has paid at least $64 million in settlements and judgments in civil rights cases related to Burge's police abuses alone. The Chicago Reader reported some of the Burge techniques may have been learned when he was in Vietnam, where he served as a military policeman.
John Burge and Zuley used the same tactics, but they was just on different sides of town. During the John Burge trial, remember that, Burge?
Yes.
They came down here to Pontiac. They wanted me to testify in John Burge's defense. Did I tell you that?
Remind me.
Well, they wanted me to testify during John Burge's trial on how some of the guys was making up stories and all this. And in return, they say, listen here, this is what we'll do. If you testify for Burge, the lawyer name was Richard Zuley. He said, listen, if you testify for Burge, we'll get so much of this shit knocked down that you'll be out of there in no time. Well, they came here to Pontiac, and I spent a month in the federal penitentiary in Chicago doing that trial. And the reason they didn't let me testify because I asked them, I said, hey, listen, when I'm on that stand, I'm gonna let the people know what the police did to me. I don't think I should have told them that. Because after I told them that, their whole attitude changed. And they kept me there. They kept me at MCC for a whole month. And they kept me there until that trial was over. They made sure the defense didn't know I was there, didn't know where I was at. They sent me there. They had another guy here, from the Department of Corrections. can't remember his name, but he went, and we was together, and we knew it was something wrong because that night at MCC, the captain came and said, "Listen, I just got a phone call and told me to separate you two guys," and they separated. Although we got there together, we was together the whole time. They separated us. It's after the trial, and once he testified and the trial was over, they put us back together. That was crazy. I spent a whole month in the federal lockup. They wanted me to testify for John Bird. Even in here, they tried to get me to help them.
Who I would want to see this documentary is the Cook County State's Attorney Office, because I know they'll still deny it. I want the Center for Wrongful. I want everybody that have told me no to really see what's going on. You know,
I would really like for Lee's story to be heard by everyone, because he definitely needs to be heard. His voice needs to be heard.
I want to make this a statement. I want to send it to as many outlets as possible, send it to local politicians, let them be aware of the issue at hand.
And part of this that is troubling is if he didn't do it and he didn't, then whoever did has never been caught. And maybe he has committed some other crimes.
I want to be outside so bad. I mean, I want to lay down in the grass. I want to walk with no shoes. I want to take this blue off. I'll never wear blue again.
In a little tent, oh, and just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. And oh, there've been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now time coming, but I know change gonna come.